My mom's friend is a woman who lives in South Korea. This happened 10 years ago. She lived with her husband and her young daughter in an apartment building in Seoul. At the time, her husband was always at work during the day and her daughter was very young, so she was a stay-at-home mother. One day, the woman went out to run some errands and she took her daughter with her. When they came back, they stood in the lobby of the apartment building and pressed the button for the elevator. When it arrived and the doors opened, she saw that there was a man already in the elevator. He was wearing a yellow raincoat, and he also had a yellow hat on his head. The woman got onto the elevator with her daughter, and she pressed the button for her floor. Something about the man made her feel uneasy. He never looked up at her. He just kept staring at the floor. It was as if he was keeping his head down so she couldn't really see his face. As the doors closed and the elevator began to ascend, the woman glanced at the man out of the corner of her eye. She noticed that he was carrying something close to his side, something that was wrapped in newspaper. The man was making her nervous. Something about him wasn't right, but she couldn't put her finger on what it was. She made her daughter stand on the other side of her. She didn't know why, but she wanted to place herself in between the man and her daughter. There was an uncomfortable silence as the elevator slowly went up, floor by floor. The woman glanced at the elevator buttons and noticed that only one button was lit up. It was the button for her floor. None of the other numbers had been pressed. Things started to click in her head. That's when she realized what it was about the man that was making her so nervous. He was wearing a raincoat, but it wasn't raining outside. The sun had been shining all day. The woman started to panic. She took out her cell phone and, even though her husband was at work, she pretended she was calling him. She started saying things like, "I'm on the elevator and about to get off. Can you open the front door for me?" And making it seem like her husband was waiting at home for her. When the elevator reached her floor and the doors opened, she quickly grabbed her daughter by the hand and got off. She started to walk as fast as she could, down the hallway to her apartment. Glancing back, she noticed that the man had also gotten off the elevator on her floor and was slowly following her down the hallway. When she got to her apartment, she started to bang on the door and said loudly, "Hey, I'm home. Open the door." She even tried to make it seem as if her husband was coming to answer the door. When the man in the yellow raincoat saw this, he stopped in his tracks, turned around and started to walk back towards the elevator. She watched him until he got back on the elevator, and then she breathed a sigh of relief. She started to punch in the key code to open her door, but her hands were shaking so much, she kept hitting the wrong numbers. Each time she pushed a button, it made a beeping sound. To her horror, she realized that the elevator doors hadn't closed. The man in the yellow raincoat was still there. He could hear the beeps. That meant he knew that no one was going to answer the door for her. She saw him get out of the elevator and come running down the hallway towards her. The woman let out a scream. She tried one more time and managed to punch in the correct key code. The door opened and she pushed her daughter inside. She jumped through the doorway herself, and when she turned around, she saw that the man in the yellow raincoat was right behind her. She just managed to slam the door in his face before he could wedge his hand into the doorway to block her. Her heart was thumping in her chest as she quickly locked the front door and peered through the peephole. She saw the man in the yellow raincoat standing at the door with a knife in his hand. As she watched, he stood there for a moment, then calmly turned and walked back towards the elevator. A few months later, the woman was watching television when a news flash came on. It said that police had captured a serial killer named Yoo Young-chul. He was responsible for the murders of over 20 young women and old men. After he killed them, he mutilated their bodies and ate parts of them. The woman told my mom that she could never forget the dread she felt when she saw the footage on the news of the serial killer being led away by police. He was still wearing the same yellow raincoat,